The whisper making rounds tonight is louder than any album drop of the summer. And if you love the culture, you need to hear it from the top. Shawn Carter, the man the world calls Jay-Z, is quietly staring down the ugliest identity crisis of his entire billion-dollar career, and the receipts are on every timeline. Reportedly, insiders inside Roc Nation are scrambling because a single zoomed-in photo of Jay-Z from the last week has done what 2 decades of diss records could never do. It has cracked the myth. The whisper says Beyonce herself was blindsided when she saw the frame that broke the internet. And family, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This isn't shade. This isn't a slow news day. This is a full-blown cultural earthquake, and Jay-Z is standing at the epicenter with nothing but a bare chin and a sinking jawline to shield him from the aftershock. Listen, this one's a whole different animal. Because when the world's most powerful power couple gets dragged for looking their age, it isn't really about the wrinkles. It is about the mask slipping. And tonight, the whisper says the mask on Jay-Z has slipped so far that even his most loyal fans are asking the question nobody in hip-hop is allowed to ask out loud. Is Grandpa HOV finished? Is the throne cracking in real time? Is the invincible mogul about to become the industry's next cautionary tale? Let me walk you through the sequence, because the timeline matters. It starts with the now viral Roots Picnic freestyle. Jay-Z stepped up, no beat, no safety net, and delivered a verse that Billboard has already broken down bar by bar as an alleged multi-target diss aimed at Drake, at Ye, at Dame Dash, at Nicki Minaj, at Tory Lanez, at anyone still standing in the room. On paper, it was vintage Jay-Z, the sovereign king reminding the peasants who owns the empire. But the reaction told a different story. Because instead of shaking the internet with fear, the internet clapped back with something the culture has never done to Shawn Carter before. It laughed. Softly. Uncomfortably. And then louder. The whisper says the laughter didn't start with the bars. It started with the face. Fans zoomed in on the concert footage, and what they saw wasn't the smooth-skinned mogul of the Big Pimpin' era. What they saw looked, they said, like a man 20 years older than the birth certificate. Sagging under the eyes. Loosening at the jaw. Wrinkles carving deeper on every close-up. And within hours, a commentator with a live camera zoomed in even further and said the 2 words that lit the whole discourse on fire. Grandpa HOV. Now, don't get it twisted. Nobody is saying Jay-Z isn't allowed to age. The man is 56 years old, and he has earned every single line on his face. But here is where the kicker lands. Jay-Z built his entire post-2010 brand on the myth that he was ageless. Untouchable. Above the game. And when Beyonce cut those famous locks off his head on opening night of the Reasonable Doubt 30th anniversary shows this July, the whisper says it wasn't a hair moment. It was a reset. A rescue. A Hail Mary from the Queen to save the king from what she could already see coming. Because family, let's talk about what nobody at Roc Nation once said out loud. The whisper says Beyonce has been quietly funneling her entire Cécred product line into Jay-Z's grooming routine for months. The made-to-lock NG process, the one that publicists spun as a fresh chapter, was reportedly a multi-day emergency intervention. Cécred products stacked on the bathroom counter like a triage station. Beyonce personally handling every strand. And when the new haircut finally debuted, the fan response was supposed to be adoration. Instead, half the internet said the same thing. Without the dreads, we can see it now. He looks tired. He looks old. He looks, they whispered, like the mask finally came off with the hair. Rumor has it Jay-Z himself was privately shaken by the reaction. Because Shawn Carter is not a man who reads comments. He is a man who reads market caps. And when the market cap of your face starts trending in the wrong direction, that is a business emergency. The whisper says Jay-Z had a private conversation with his inner circle the week the Roots picnic footage went viral, and the question on the table was simple. Do we lean into the elder statesman narrative, or do we fight the clock? Reportedly, the room split. Beyonce, sources say, argued for the elder statesman play. Age with grace. On the gray. Become the godfather of the culture. Others in the room, and here is where it gets explosive, reportedly pushed Jay-Z toward what one insider called the Diddy playbook. Aggressive dermatology. Aggressive fillers. Aggressive youth simulation. Now, here is why that word, Diddy, is the one word Roc Nation absolutely does not want in the same paragraph as Jay-Z right now. Because Diddy, at 56, spent the last decade running the most public anti-aging campaign in hip-hop, and we all watched where that road ended. The Whisper says Jay-Z's team is terrified of even the visual comparison. And yet, every time a fan pulls up a side-by-side of Jay-Z at the Roots picnic next to Pharrell Williams at a Louis Vuitton show, Pharrell, who is 53 and still looks like he could pass for the intern, the same word trends. Aging, 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 fast. And the more the internet stacks those images, the more the whisper turns into a chorus, and the chorus turns into a verdict. But moving right along, because the aging discourse is only the surface. The Whisper says Jay-Z's real crisis isn't his face. It is his catalog's relationship with his face. Reasonable Doubt just crossed 30 years old. Blueprint is 25. The Black Album is 22. Jay-Z is now, mathematically, an oldies act performing for a Gen Z audience that grew up on Drake, on Kendrick, on Kai Cenat clips, on TikTok snippets that reduce entire careers to 5-second loops. And the terrifying math for Roc Nation is this. When Jay-Z stood on that Roots picnic stage and threw the freestyle, he was aiming at Drake and Ye. But the audience he was aiming at wasn't listening. That audience was watching Sabrina Carpenter, Central C, Ice Spice, and 100 creators the elder statesman has never even heard of. And here's the kicker. Nas, the man who spent an entire decade at war with Jay-Z, reportedly said something in a private conversation that has been quietly circulating in industry text threads. The Nas quote, according to The Whisper, resurrected an old bar about a rat with whiskers standing next to beans. Now, that line comes straight from an ancient Nas verse, but the industry is dragging it back into the light this month, and the reason is simple. The bar suddenly reads different. Because at 56, with a bare chin and loose skin and eyes that have seen every industry secret from Aaliyah to Diddy, Jay-Z is no longer being compared to Nas. He is being compared to the ghosts of his own younger self. And the ghost is winning. Beyonce, The Whisper says, is furious. Not at Jay-Z, at the internet. Because Beyonce has spent the last decade being the most protected, most orchestrated, most tightly controlled celebrity brand on planet Earth. And she has watched her husband refuse, or fail, to protect his own image with the same discipline. Reportedly, Beyonce sat Jay-Z down after the Cécred launch in April and pushed a full skincare regimen on him. Vitamin C serums, retinol, snail mucin, LED masks. The whole industry playbook that Beyonce herself has been quietly running since her mid-20s, which is exactly why she can still walk out and pass for 30. But Jay-Z, The Whisper says, refused. Told Beyonce he was Shawn Carter from Marcy Projects, and Shawn Carter from Marcy Projects does not do serums. Now don't get it twisted. That is a beautiful sentence. It is also, reportedly, the sentence that has Roc Nation executives waking up in cold sweats. Because Marcy Projects Shawn Carter is a nostalgia brand. And nostalgia brands do not sell Cécred bottles. They do not sell Tidal subscriptions. They do not fill the front rows of a Beyoncé tour with the 18-year-olds Roc Nation needs for the next 30 years of revenue. The math is the math. And Jay-Z, The Whisper says, has been avoiding the math for years now, because Shawn Carter has never been a man who lost a math argument in his life, until this year, when the math finally showed up on his face. And here's the kicker nobody in hip-hop wants to say out loud. Jay-Z's aging isn't just a face problem. It is a business problem. And it is a business problem specifically because Jay-Z spent 20 years selling the myth that he was above the game, above the dices, above the trends, above the clock. And the clock, family, doesn't care about your billion-dollar credit line. The clock is undefeated. The clock has buried empires older than Jay-Z's. The clock will bury this one too, unless somebody at Roc Nation figures out how to sell a rebrand faster than the internet can post a wrinkle edit. Let me pull the receipts. In May of this year, when Jay-Z did the multi-day DeLock session with Beyonce, insiders say the emotional cost was heavier than the physical one. Because for Jay-Z, those locks weren't just hair. They were the last public marker that separated Grandpa HOV from Reasonable Doubt J. The moment they came off, the mask came with them. And Beyonce, The Whisper says, saw it happening in real time. Reportedly told her stylist that night that she wished she had done it 3 years earlier. Because now, with the Roots picnic backlash, the timing looks reactive. Damage control. A queen frantically trying to save a king who spent too many years pretending the throne wasn't creaking. Here is where the story gets even wilder. Family. The Whisper says Jay-Z has quietly been in and out of a private clinic in Los Angeles this summer. Not for anything cosmetic, but for a broader wellness protocol that reportedly includes hormone panels, sleep studies, and what one insider described as a longevity optimization regimen. Peptides. For nutrient stacks. Cold plunge therapy. The whole billionaire biohacking playbook that Brian Johnson has made famous. Now, if the Whisper is accurate, that would explain why Beyonce has been so publicly relaxed lately. She isn't worried about the concert reviews. She is worried about the actuarial tables. Because when your husband is 56 and the internet is calling him a grandfather, and your combined empire depends on him being visible and sharp for another 2 decades, you don't buy him a serum. You buy him a longevity protocol. But here's the twist. Reportedly, some inside Roc Nation are furious that any of this is leaking. Because the Jay-Z myth was always Teflon. Untouchable. Now suddenly, every gossip channel is running Grandpa HOV edits. Every barbershop is debating whether Beyonce is going to be a widow at 50, and every rap podcast is asking the same question. If Jay-Z can be dragged this hard for wrinkles, what happens the day he actually stumbles on a bar? What happens the day the freestyle isn't sharp? What happens the day the throne actually cracks? And more importantly, family. Who is standing behind the throne when the crack finally splits it open? And now here comes the part the algorithm rewards. Because the Whisper has been braiding 2 stories together all month, and family, you deserve to hear both braids. The first braid is the aging discourse. The second braid is the succession discourse. Because inside Roc Nation, insiders say the real conversation happening behind closed doors isn't about Jay-Z's face at all. It is about who inherits the throne. Blue Ivy. Rumi. Sir. Or reportedly, a much wilder possibility that has been floating in industry text threads for 6 months now. That Jay-Z is quietly grooming a completely non-family successor, a producer-executive hybrid the public has never even heard of, to run the empire when Grandpa HOV finally steps back. Reportedly, Beyonce is against it. Wants the empire to stay Carter. Wants Blue Ivy on the training rails already. Wants the Cécred brand and the Roc Nation brand to eventually merge under one bloodline. And Jay-Z, the Whisper says, is not so sure. Because Jay-Z, at 56, is finally starting to think about the one thing Shawn Carter from Marcy Projects never had to think about. Legacy. Not money. Not chart position. Legacy. And when a man starts thinking about legacy, the Whisper says, he stops thinking about looking young. He starts thinking about looking permanent. That is the shift the internet just caught on camera. That is why the Roots Picnic freestyle hit different. That was not Jay-Z fighting Drake. That was Jay-Z fighting time. And time, family, is a fighter with no press schedule and no PR firm. Time doesn't take meetings. Time doesn't sign deals. Time doesn't lose. And Jay-Z, for the first time in his entire billion-dollar career, is up against an opponent he cannot outrun, cannot outspend, and cannot outrap. Now, here comes the kicker Roc Nation absolutely does not want you to hear. Reportedly, Jay-Z has been having quiet conversations with his old rival Nas about a joint elder statesman project. The Whisper says the concept is a full-length album, produced entirely by a legacy roster. DJ Premier, Pete Rock, Just Blaze, No ID, with the 2 of them trading verses on every track. Nas, the Whisper says, is enthusiastic. Jay-Z, the Whisper says, is dragging his feet. Because for Jay-Z to say yes to that album is for Jay-Z to publicly accept the Godfather chair. And the Godfather chair, family, is a one-way seat. You do not get up from it. You die in it. Beyonce, reportedly, is pushing him to take the seat. She sees the Nas project as the exit ramp. A dignified fade into the mogul era, where Jay-Z stops being a rapper and starts being an institution. But Jay-Z, the Whisper says, isn't ready to fade. Not yet. Not while the internet is still calling him old. Because Shawn Carter, at his core, is still the same competitive Marcy Projects kid who needs the last word. And the last word cannot be Grandpa HOV. The last word has to be something that reminds the culture, one more time, that Jay-Z was here first, that Jay-Z rewrote the rules, that Jay-Z built the industry the little ones are now playing inside. So here is what the Whisper says happens next. And you didn't hear it from me. Jay-Z is reportedly planning one more solo album. Not the Nas project. a solo Jay-Z album, entirely his own, aimed squarely at the audience that just laughed at his face. The concept, according to insiders, is a full album of Jay-Z rapping over Gen Z native production. Hyperpop textures, drill drums, plug synths, the sonic palette of Cash Cobain and Ice Spice, filtered through the mind of the man who wrote Public Service Announcement. Beyonce, The Whisper says, thinks it's a mistake, thinks it will read as desperate, thinks the elder statesman play is the only play that ages well. And this, family, is where the real drama lives. Because for the first time in 25 years of the most publicly perfect marriage in music, Beyonce and Jay-Z are reportedly on opposite sides of a strategic decision that will define the last 20 years of both their careers. She wants him to become an institution. He wants to become a threat again. She wants Grandpa HOV to sit in a suit and collect awards. He wants Shawn Carter to stand on a stage and remind the culture who owns it. And nobody in the Carter household, The Whisper says, is willing to blink first. The Whisper says the argument has been quiet but persistent. Cécred launches side by side with Roc Nation strategy meetings. Late-night calls with ANRS on one side and skincare chemists on the other. Blue Ivy, reportedly, is watching all of it and taking notes. Because Blue Ivy is the one Carter child who genuinely understands both empires, and Blue Ivy, The Whisper says, is quietly building her own case for succession without ever raising her voice. Here is the kicker nobody has connected yet. Blue Ivy is 13 now. In 5 years, she will be old enough to actually run a division. In 10 years, she will be old enough to run the whole thing. And Jay-Z, The Whisper says, knows the countdown clock. Knows that every year he refuses to become the elder statesman, he is a year closer to being usurped by his own daughter. And Shawn Carter from Marcy Projects, family, does not like being usurped. Not by Drake, not by Kendrick, and especially not by a 13-year-old girl who has his last name and her mother's business instincts. So what does he do? Reportedly, he doubles down. He goes to the Roots picnic. He drops the freestyle. He aims at everyone. Drake, Ye, Dame, Nicki, Tory, because if he takes down enough people, the internet will forget the wrinkles. And that, family, is the calculation that just broke on him. Because the internet didn't forget the wrinkles. The internet zoomed in on them. Frame by frame. Pixel by pixel. And every zoom said the same thing. Grandpa. HOV. Meanwhile, The Whisper says Pharrell Williams has been quietly weaponized against Jay-Z in the group chat court of hip-hop. Because Pharrell, at 53, is the counterexample nobody in the culture can shut up about. Pharrell walks into a Louis Vuitton event looking like a college sophomore. Pharrell does nerd. Reunion posts and the comments are all about his skin. Pharrell has quietly become the industry's living proof that aging is optional if you take the routine seriously. And every time Pharrell trends, Jay-Z, The Whisper says, gets a little quieter in the group chats. Because the Pharrell comparison is the one comparison Jay-Z cannot answer with a bar. You cannot rap your way out of a photograph. Nas, meanwhile, has picked his side. The Whisper says Nas is genuinely thrilled about the elder statesman narrative, because Nas has been performing it beautifully since Life is Good. Nas embraced the gray. Nas embraced the suits. Nas embraced the museum piece energy. And now Nas gets to watch the man who spent 20 years mocking him for aging gracefully finally arrive at the same doorstep, uninvited, holding a bottle of retinol and a mirror. There is a certain justice, The Whisper says, that Nas is savoring in private. Diddy, of course, is the elephant in every Jay-Z paragraph right now. Because when the fans zoom in and say Jay-Z looks old, the follow-up thought is always the same. At least he doesn't look like Diddy. And that is a low bar, family. That is a floor, not a ceiling. When your best defense is that you don't look like the man in federal custody, your PR team is not winning. Your PR team is surviving. And The Whisper says Jay-Z's PR team, right now, is doing pure survival mode. They are not building a narrative. They are catching bullets. Meanwhile, the Roc Nation office in New York, The Whisper says, has become a pressure cooker. Meetings running long. Executives arguing about tour visuals. One camp saying black and white filters can save the aesthetic. Another camp saying the aesthetic is not the problem, the myth is. And a third camp, the smallest one, saying the loudest sentence of them all. Maybe Jay-Z should just take a year off. Maybe the man needs to disappear for 12 months, come back with a curated reintroduction, and let the internet miss him for once. Reportedly, that suggestion did not go over well in the room, because Jay-Z has never disappeared from anything in his life. Jay-Z was on reasonable doubt on his own terms, and Jay-Z, the whisper says, will exit the game on his own terms too, wrinkles or no wrinkles. But here is where the story gets uncomfortable for the loyalists, because loyalists are already lining up on the timeline defending Jay-Z with the same tired sentence. Let the man age. He is 56. Leave him alone. And listen, family, that defense is not wrong. It is just not enough. Because Jay-Z is not being dragged for aging. Jay-Z is being dragged for aging while pretending he isn't. Jay-Z is being dragged for stepping onto the Roots picnic stage in a fitted cap, trying to hit Drake-level cadences with a Nas-level face. The dissonance is the problem. The dissonance is what the internet zoomed in on. And the dissonance, family, is what Beyonce has been trying to fix in private for 18 months. And now, we sit here on July 23rd, watching a billionaire mogul realize, in real time, that the one enemy his money cannot buy off is the one that shows up in every mirror. Time, gravity, collagen. The whisper says Beyonce wants him to surrender to the mirror. Jay-Z, the whisper says, still wants to fight it. And every day he fights, the internet gets a little more ruthless. Every day he refuses the elder statesman chair, the timeline gets a little louder. Every day Grandpa HOV trends, Roc Nation loses a little more of the mystique that built the empire in the first place. Who wins that fight? Family is the question that decides the next chapter of the culture. Because if Jay-Z surrenders, hip-hop gets its godfather. If Jay-Z fights and wins, hip-hop gets a new template for aging on your own terms. And if Jay-Z fights and loses, hip-hop gets a cautionary tale that will be told at every rap podcast for the next 50 years.